Tried to stab someone. You did? Yeah. Who was it that you just stabbed? I don't know.
Now, a Fox 17 in-depth presentation.
Connor was laying there, and there was blood everywhere.
A young life cut short. A little boy, forever 9 years old.
Not a day goes by that I don't imagine what he would be doing.
A deadly stabbing on a playground in Kentwood, changing the lives of so many.
Kept trying to tell me that he loved me and was trying to hold my hand.
Including the other child who held the knife.
You know, I see his face when I go to sleep at night.
And would go on to become Kent County's youngest convicted killer.
I absolutely regret what I did, and I took the consequences.
This evening, we're learning more about Connor VERKERKE from his mom and taking a look at the years-long journey to rehabilitation for Jamarion Lawhorn following that violent day in 2014.
The only people I will ever really take judgment from is his parents and his family and God himself.
Thanks for joining us for this special edition of Fox 17 News. I'm Janice Allen. For the very first time, we're hearing what happened that day in the words of Jamarion Lawhorn. A year after being released, he's opening up and sharing his story only on Fox 17. Tonight, we're learning more about what happened that fateful day, what his life was like after sentencing, and how Jamarion is making the most of his second chance.
I'm trying to get my story out there. You know, a lot of people heard the story, but they haven't heard the voice.
In 2014, he was thrust into the spotlight after a brutal stabbing on a Kentwood playground.
A lot of people remember that scared kid in the courtroom. But what do you want people to know about who you are now?
They put on the headlines, Kent County's youngest killer. And I know a lot of people address me as Kent County's youngest killer. But, you know, when you approach me, I'm Jamarion Lawhorn.
Now, nearly 8 years later.
When that story first came out, nobody knew the real Jamarion. And it's crazy.
Jamarion Lawhorn,
that was me at my worst,
is ready to tell his side of the story.
Nobody would know how that day went besides, you know, me.
The summer days were winding down, and kids like Michael Connor VERKERKE, who was known as Connor, were soaking up every last minute, playing like he often would at the playground near Pinebrook Village Mobile Home Park.
Let's go back to that day. What do you remember about that day?
I remember, you know, I was going through a lot. And one thing I do remember is I was numb. I was really numb. And it had got to the point where I was so numb that, you know, I couldn't sleep.
Jamarion left home that day troubled, headed for the same playground.
Did you usually go there and like play every day? Was it pretty common for you to go there?
I actually seen his family and them a lot. I would see their kids out playing, and I usually would ride my bike through there.
That day would be very different, with Jamarion stabbing 9-year-old Connor to death.
I seen Michael, you know, and it's like at that moment my intentions wasn't, you know, to hurt, but I snapped.
Connor was stabbed 4 times and also suffered a cut to his arm. His younger brother tried to get him back home to get help, but it was too late.
Connor was laying there, and there was blood everywhere.
No words to explain holding my dying son in my arms. No way to count the trauma of his brothers watching him die.
When I realized he died, it was like, that's when everything settled in. That's when I realized what I did, and I knew at that point that I messed up.
I offered him my phone. I assumed he was calling his mother. Lo and behold, he was calling 911.
Tried to stab someone. You did? Yeah. Who was it that you just stabbed? I don't know. The person's in pain. They're gonna try to beat me. They're gonna try to beat me. So hurry up and come kill me or take me to death or something and beg me why you doing movies.
Investigators would later learn that Jamarion had taken prescription pills that day. Claims of child abuse at his home would also soon be revealed.
You must have been in a lot of pain, because to think that that was the best way out.
That still didn't give me, you know, the right to take a life. Yeah, and I want to be clear, I don't want to make any excuses for what I did. You know, I'm taking full responsibility, and I embrace that. I got to.
Jamarion was charged as an adult with first-degree murder. As his case moved through the system, his mother, Anita Lawhorn, and stepfather Bernard Harold also made headlines, charged with child abuse after bruises were found on Jamarion's body in juvenile detention.
Beat with the belt by his mother, extension cord by his stepdad, and then grandmother apparently hit him with a sandal. All of that history and his physical examination led to a diagnosis of probable inflicted trauma and pediatric physical abuse.
The case led to another discovery, a child abuse investigation that started in May 2013 that ultimately went nowhere. At the time, a worker with Child Protective Services was called to their home, finding marks on Jamarion as well as what they called deplorable living conditions. But that CPS worker never reported it to Kentwood Police.
We think CPS dropped the ball, DHS dropped the ball. And had they done their job, maybe we wouldn't be here. And maybe Jamarion wouldn't be where he is either.
Jamarion's stepfather pleaded guilty while his mother was convicted of third-degree child abuse in 2015. Jamarion invoked the Fifth Amendment during her trial and did not testify. In September 2015, it would be Jamarion's turn to face a judge. Now 13, his defense attorneys argued that he was legally insane at the time of the murder, pointing to the abuse and trauma he suffered as a child.
I was so scared, I was afraid. I was afraid of my stepfather. I wanted to die because I thought there was no way out.
After 3 days of testimony, Jamarion was found guilty, the teen expressing his remorse with the world at sentencing.
I know what I did was wrong. I just do not understand why I did it. I made a terrible mistake. I just want you to know that I am sorry for all the pain you have been going through.
The judge handing down what's called a blended sentence, probation and 8 years at Muskegon River Youth Home, a chance for Jamarion to grow and change.
Anything is possible at this point. It's really up to him and how much effort he puts into trying to rehabilitate himself and how much he tries to be a decent human being.
I'm okay with that. The hard truth is that it doesn't matter how long he's locked up. It doesn't matter. Connor's not coming back.
After spending just over 5 years at Everett Youth Center, Jamarion would walk out the doors a free man. But was he a changed man? And what would he do with his second chance? Still ahead, we're hearing from the two people whose support may have very well saved Jamarion.
I told him, I said, listen, I don't know what's going to happen, but if I can help you in any way I can, I want to, if you're willing to fight along too.
Plus, what led up to his early release last year, just shy of his 19th birthday. To see more of our interviews with Jamarion and the background on this case, you can head to our website or mobile app. We'll be right back.
Every behavior comes with a consequence. And no matter what it is, it either is positive or is negative. It all comes with a consequence, and what I did was completely unacceptable.
Jamarion Lawhorn was just 13 when he had to face the consequences of his crime. Tonight, never-before-seen photos of his time at Everett Youth Center and the two people who helped Jamarion change course.
When I first met Jamarion, it was in detention, and you know, he was this little kid. I'm like, how is this even possible? Like, how could he even do this? What would drive someone to do that?
Was he a monster or a misguided child in need of direction? These never-before-seen images showing a young Jamarion Lawhorn in the weeks leading up to his sentencing. Frank Briones recalls meeting that troubled young boy in 2015.
I read his charges, and I was like, wow.
Working as a youth specialist in juvenile detention.
I felt he was one of those kids that kind of got that bad card that he was dealt.
At the time, Jamarion was just 13, charged as an adult, and soon to be convicted of murder for stabbing and killing 9-year-old Connor VERKERKE on a Kentwood playground.
I went to somebody who, didn't have anything to do with what I was going through, and I have to live with that every day.
Briones made it a point to befriend Jamarion.
I just felt like it was the right thing to do. Like, he needed something.
Leading him to write a letter to the judge asking for leniency.
I don't know if it made a difference or not, but I would like to think that it was a different perspective from somebody who was there working with him, who got to know him.
Jamarion's sentence would be time at the Muskegon River Youth Home, now Everett Youth Center, until he was at least 21, avoiding prison with the hopes of being rehabilitated and returned to society as an adult.
I agree with the fact that we are not going to know who he is once he's 19 or 21, if he's rehabilitated or not. And if he puts the work in, then that's fine. But if not, I agree with the option being there for him to continue to be locked up.
With this case over, Jamarion may have thought he'd seen the last of Briones, but it was just the beginning of a budding friendship.
I told him, I said, listen, I don't know what's going to happen, but if I can help you in any way I can, I want to, if you're willing to fight along too.
And Briones kept his word, leaving his family once a month to make the hour-and-a-half-long drive to see Jamarion, visits that may have helped to save his life.
He felt isolated, he felt alone.
As Jamarion tried several times to commit suicide.
Those visits started to help him and reassure him.
With the days and weeks passing in Everett, reality started to sink in. It was there Jamarion had to not only confront his crime, but cope with feelings of anger, frustration, and depression, while also grappling with the abuse and trauma that came out during his trial.
As humans, we have different ways to cope with things. I didn't have them ways to cope.
The intense therapy and individualized treatment plan helping Jamarion sort through his complicated emotions.
Our program is pretty trauma intensive, so counseling services is a huge portion of it. We're looking at providing treatment for, the intellectual side, your mental health, your physical health, your emotional health. So of course, education, vocational training is a huge part of our program. With therapy comes, addressing the behaviors. Obviously, we have to address that to make them safe in the communities, but also providing them the skills so they can be successful.
With Briones by his side, Jamarion began looking forward to the simple things in life, celebrating birthdays and holidays in custody, eventually earning home visits.
He started to trust me, and I started to believe in him more and more and more.
Support for Jamarion also poured in from around the world.
I got cards from Europe, all over the country, and they didn't realize how much that boost or pushed me forward, how much it meant to me.
Several of those letters coming from one woman in West Michigan. PAULA CRESWELL says she felt compelled to reach out after hearing Jamarion's story.
Watching the news along with everybody else, and it's the one picture of him where he turns and looks at the camera in the courtroom.
It moved her to put pen to paper.
I came home and I wrote him a card, and I did that about once a month. Writing
Jamarion cards and letters for a year before finally getting one back.
I was in a rough space at the time, and I wrote her back and I said, I'd love for you to come up and visit.
It would be the first visit of many.
From the day I met Jamarion, it was like I knew him my whole life, and he said the same thing to Frank.
I found myself actually telling her about, how the feelings I was going through and the things I've been through in my past, how I felt with my court proceedings.
From strangers to a critical support system for Jamarion. He now had two people in his corner as he completed his time at Everett, even earning his GED.
I did not believe that I have this much support after, what I'd done. I was expecting for the world to give up on me.
Motivated to make a change, Jamarion would be released 2 years early on March 1st, 2021, just 2 weeks shy of turning 19.
That was the day he was released, and all grins and happy. He was doing all good things in there. He was doing things that I think the court felt would do more damage to him, keeping him there, as opposed to get him ready to join society.
After more than 5 years, Jamarion was ready to leave Everett with newfound lessons.
When things are not going right for me, it's easier for me to overcome them because, I realized that me being where I'm at today is literally a blessing. I could have been in prison for the rest of my life. The courts did not have to work how they worked for me.
And new family. These pictures captured over the years showing the transformation.
It just kind of shows, how he's grown and how it's become just the smile. It just says it all.
Now it would be up to Jamarion to show the world he was different. Coming up, Jamarion ready to navigate life as a free man, but what would his first move be?
When I first got out, I was very determined. You know, I had it.
I remember meeting a young man who had a sparkle in his eye and a complicated story and a lot of hope.
What he did and the organizations he sought out to help set himself up for success. Welcome back to this special presentation. Jamarion Lawhorn was once introduced to the world as Kent County's youngest killer.
Does that name bother you?
So for a while it did. You know, it really bothered me.
Now, as Jamarion approaches adulthood, he is determined to move away from that title. From a troubled boy to a teen released during a global pandemic, the world changed while Jamarion Lawhorn was growing up in juvenile custody, but he was eager to show he had also changed.
Let's talk about your TikTok video. That was obviously very powerful and, you know, very vulnerable for you. What made you want to put that together?
I walked around with a smile on my face, but deep inside I was hurting to the point where I couldn't sleep. I just want people to know my story. I want people to see how I changed from that story.
More than 7 years after stabbing and killing 9-year-old Connor VERKERKE, Jamarion is ready to distance himself from those headlines while living a life that honors the one he took.
I see his face when I go to sleep at night, and that's the consequences behind my actions. But I know that I can at least, you know, turn around and make an impact.
Jamarion's first step toward making that impact brought him through the doors of 70x7 Life Recovery in Wyoming.
I think that one of the things that he walked away from here with was hope.
My husband is the executive director of 70x7.
He was extremely fertile soil, took all the information in.
Where Jamarion completed the organization's 2-week Changes course, learning job readiness and life skills for the next chapter.
The first few weeks to making sure Jamarion was on the right path were absolutely critical to his rehabilitation. You could truly see him focusing on being a better version of himself. I think that was very important to him.
That program propelling Jamarion into the workforce thanks to a partnership between 70x7 and Next Step of West Michigan. Here inside the old Kindle Furniture Company building, Jamarion went through Next Step's paid training, learning woodworking skills and earning a full-time position.
We build bunk beds, we do bird houses, we build bat houses. What else? We do display stands for Meyer, all type of things.
The faith-based nonprofit proud to offer the Next Step to anyone in need looking for a better life.
It's a place of many chances, second, third, sometimes fourth chance, but it's a place of grace and opportunity.
Phil NELLIS, the manager of manufacturing, says Jamarion has become a mentor here, now helping to teach and train new students that were once in his shoes.
Not only is he focused on rebuilding his life in this first year that he's been out, but he's already turning towards how can I help others.
The job has been a chance for Jamarion to prove himself and change perceptions, even among coworkers who become like family.
You meet me and nothing like it. You wouldn't even know I was even incarcerated or had anything to do with what I did.
A new job and a new place to live. Remember the woman who began writing Jamarion while he was in juvenile custody? PAULA CRESWELL opened up her Jenison home to the teen, who's become like another son.
So when I got out, it's like she opened her arms and literally taught me adulthood in a way.
It's kind of amazing. It's kind of like watching a kid learn to walk and then ride a bike and then drive a car. The growth has been so fast. The last year, he came home not knowing anything about what it was like to be in a family. Mm-hmm. And in the last year, he He's just a normal part of our home now.
Making the most of his second chance, Jamarion signed up for classes at GRCC, learned to swim and drive, and even bought his first car all on his own.
I'm proud, but I'm not satisfied. You know, I know I can do a lot more, and I know it's a lot more to come.
Do you think it's possible for you to have a normal life?
I've learned the hard way that there's no such thing as a normal life. No, I embrace my life and the things I've been through.
And during the inevitable ups and downs, Jamarion has a motivation unlike any other to keep moving forward.
I still have days where I feel like I don't deserve what I have, but I realized that, you know, it's not right for me to do that. Because, like I said before, I'm not just living for me. I'm living for somebody else, too.
He hopes to use his story to inspire others through public speaking or mentoring at-risk kids.
What do you want, Jamarion Lawhorn? What do you want that name to be associated with going forward?
I want that name to be associated with, you know, Next Step of West Michigan, a motivational speaker, you know, hard, determined, motivated person. And I want it to be an icon. I want Michael Connor VERKERKE to be an icon as well.
Connor, who was innocently playing on a Kentwood playground when he was killed, would have turned 17 this month.
Just wonder, have you forgiven yourself?
I'm still in the process of forgiving myself. I'm a lot further than what I was, but I'm still in the process.
Forgiveness from the VERKERKE family is Jamarion's biggest wish, although he says he has made peace with Connor's grandmother.
What would you say to them if they are watching this?
I would say I'm sorry. And I know that they're hearing it from me a lot. But, you know, I really I can't give back what I've taken. And I want them to know that, you know, no matter what, through me, his name will definitely be known in a positive way.
In January, less than a year after being released, a judge also released Jamarion from probation. We reached out to the VERKERKEs about this story, and I spoke with Connor's mother, DANI, who said that her son was compassionate, who loved to dance, and that he wanted to be a music teacher and join the Peace Corps one day. She sent me a message that reads in part, quote, "I wish everyone could have met him. He was an incredible young boy. He was funny and sweet and had a flair for theatrics. He used to dress up and put on skits with his brothers. It never gets touched on, but he was gender fluid. When he was stabbed, I was afraid someone had hurt him because maybe they had seen him outside before that day playing in one of his dresses. I always worked so hard to protect him while allowing him to express himself. There is some comfort in knowing that it was not a hate crime against him for being a part of the LGBTQ community. I feel I have made my peace with Jamarion by letting go of any intentions or wishes about his future. His life is his." A lot of people don't know that Jamarion and Connor actually share the same birthday of March 14th. Jamarion says he wants to pay tribute to Connor on that day from now on.
So for me to be standing here right now and be able to talk to y'all is like, it's a blessing for me.
He started by sharing a story at 78x7 on his birthday, speaking to returning citizens and juvenile offenders. Jamarion was candid about the tough childhood he experienced and the pain that pushed him to commit the crime. He urged everyone listening to own up to their wrongs and realize that every behavior has a consequence.
He kept saying that we are not our mistakes. And it's true. Just because you did one mistake or one bad choice doesn't mean that that's who you are.
Life kind of threw him a bunch of curveballs, and he's got a lot of resilience, and I think hopefully it motivates other people and kids and everybody else to kind of see that you can change your life.
Jamarion says that his birthday is not a day to just celebrate, but to never forget what he did. To see Jamarion's full interview, just look for this story on our website and our news app. Thanks for watching Jamarion's Journey.